There is a moon out at Saturn that is throwing its own ocean into space. In 2008, a spacecraft flew straight through the spray and tasted what came off it. 9 years later, we destroyed that spacecraft on purpose, and part of the reason we destroyed it was this moon. This is Cosmian. Join us at the small, bright moon that is throwing its own ocean into space, and at the spacecraft we flew through it and then destroyed on purpose. Enceladus is small, about 500 kilometers across. That is roughly the width of Arizona or England from the south coast to the Scottish border. Set against Saturn, it is nothing at all. You could line up more than 200 of them across that planet and still have room to spare. But it happens to be the brightest object in the entire solar system, and I mean that precisely. Not the biggest and not the hottest, but the one that reflects more of the sunlight falling on it than anything else out there. That sounds like a piece of trivia until you work out what it has to mean. A surface only stays bright by staying clean, and nothing in the outer solar system stays clean on its own. Dust and micrometeorites rain down on every world out there for billions of years, darkening whatever they land on. An old surface is always a dark one. A moon that white is therefore a moon that is being resurfaced, and something has to be doing the resurfacing. Being that reflective has a second consequence, and it is a cruel one. If you throw almost all the sunlight back, you keep almost none of the warmth. The surface of Enceladus sits at about minus 201 degrees. William Herschel found it in 1789 from a garden in England, using a telescope he had built himself. For the next 2 centuries, it stayed exactly what he saw, a dot. Voyager went past in the 1980s and turned the dot into a disk. The disk was smooth and white and quiet, and nobody could explain why. It stayed unexplained until a spacecraft went into orbit around Saturn and started paying proper attention. Cassini reached Saturn in 2004, and it was not there for Enceladus. That was one small icy moon in a system with more than 100 of them. The interesting targets were Titan and the rings, and the enormous planet in the middle, and a 500-kilometer snowball was not high on anybody's list. What changed that was an instrument nobody expects to make a discovery, because it takes no pictures and points at nothing. A magnetometer simply measures the magnetic field it is sitting in. Saturn has an enormous magnetic field, and Cassini was reading it constantly. Near Enceladus, that field was bent out of shape by something pushing back against it. That is a genuinely strange result, because bending a planet's magnetic field takes gas. A thin cloud of gas around a moon will do it perfectly well. The trouble is that a moon this small has almost no gravity to hold gas down. Anything it released should have drifted away and left nothing behind, unless something was topping it up. NASA's wording for what they suspected at the time is careful, and I am going to keep their caution. Something, perhaps an atmosphere, was pushing against Saturn's magnetic field near Enceladus. They did not know what it was, and they only knew for certain that it had no business being there at all. So they went back and looked properly. In 2005, Cassini turned its cameras on the South Pole and took the first detailed pictures anyone had ever seen of it. What came back from that pass did not look anything like the rest of the moon. Most of Enceladus is ancient, and you can tell at a glance because it is covered in craters. Craters accumulate steadily over billions of years and never go away unless something actively repaves the ground. The South Pole had almost none of them. It was young and broken and strange, scattered with ice boulders the size of houses and carved by a pattern of cracks that appears nowhere else on the moon. Above all of that, hanging over the region in the pictures, there was a cloud of water vapor. 4 long fractures run across that terrain, each around 135 kilometers long and measurably warmer than the ground on either side. The scientists who found them started calling them the tiger stripes. That was never an official name, and it stuck anyway. which is usually a sign that a name is a good one. Out of those cracks, ice and gas are coming up at 400 meters every single second, which is fast enough to leave the moon behind entirely. And it does not stop just above the surface. The plume reaches hundreds of kilometers up, which on a moon only 500 kilometers across means the spray stands taller than the world it is coming from. If you were somewhere on the ground at the South Pole, looking up, the jets would fill the sky above you and keep going, and there would be no cloud layer to stop them, because there is no air. Enceladus cannot hold on to any of it, and it does not try. The material sprays out into space, and a small part of it never falls back at all. That part goes into orbit around Saturn instead, and it is still up there now, spread into a faint band circling the whole planet. Saturn's E-ring is not made of Saturn at all. It is made of Enceladus, and it has been fed by that moon for as long as the jets have been running. Most of the spray does come back down though, settling as snow onto the moon that threw it, and that answers the question Voyager left hanging 2 decades earlier. Enceladus is the brightest object in the solar system because it never stops snowing on itself. This is the point where it stops being a story about a strange moon and becomes a story about what we decided to do about it. The plume goes up, which means a spacecraft can fly through it. One flying through with the right instruments open can find out exactly what it is made of. No landing, no drilling, no ice-penetrating machine that nobody has built yet. Just fly through the spray and read what hits you. So in 2008, that is precisely what they did, taking Cassini on a close pass over the South Pole, opening its instruments as it went, and sampling the plume of an alien ocean directly while the spacecraft was still moving through it. Read that slowly, because the plain language hides how strange it is. A machine built on Earth flew through material coming out of the inside of another world and analyzed it while it was still moving. It is worth being clear about how close that actually was. On one of these passes, Cassini came within about 25 kilometers of the surface. 25 kilometers is a commute. It is closer than most people live to their nearest city, on a machine traveling at several kilometers a second, aimed at a moon by people sitting 1 billion kilometers away who would not know whether it had worked for well over an hour. What it found in that spray was water vapor and carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and a quantity of organic material. Organic does not mean alive, and I want to be careful here because it is the single most misreported word in this whole subject. It means carbon-based chemistry, the family of molecules that living things are built out of. Those molecules can sit around perfectly happily with nothing alive within 1 billion kilometers. Finding them is not finding life. It is finding the ingredients, which is a much smaller claim and still a remarkable one. What was not expected was how much of it there was, because the organic material in that plume turned out to be about 20 times more concentrated than anyone had predicted. Later passes filled in the rest of the list, adding salts and silica and methane, and perhaps a little ammonia, and either carbon monoxide or nitrogen, depending on how you read the data. Those last few are still genuinely uncertain, and it is worth saying out loud which parts of this we know and which parts are still being argued about. The salt is the part that matters most, because salt has to come from somewhere, and the somewhere it comes from is rock, which means that water has been sitting in contact with the inside of the moon for a very long time. Rain is fresh water, and seawater is salty. And the reason seawater is salty is that it has spent a very long time sitting on stone. So the water down there is touching rock, which raises the obvious question: how much water is down there? The answer arrived from an unlikely direction, which was the way the moon wobbles. Enceladus goes round Saturn once every 33 hours, and as it goes, it rocks very slightly back and forth on its axis. If a moon is solid all the way through, it rocks one way, and if there is a liquid layer separating the outer shell from the core, so that the shell can slide independently, it rocks differently and by a larger amount. Enceladus rocks by the larger amount, and when you combine that with the tiny shifts in Cassini's radio signal as it flew through the moon's gravity, you get an answer that is not a pocket of meltwater under a crack. It is a global ocean going all the way round the moon, underneath the entire surface. Above that ocean sits a shell of ice, 20 to 25 kilometers thick on average. And here is the part that matters to anyone who ever wants to reach it. At the South Pole, where the fractures are, that shell may be as little as 1 to 5 kilometers thick. That is not much. It is a thickness we have already drilled through on this planet. So the ocean is there, and it is salty, and it is in contact with rock, which leaves the question of 500-kilometer ball of ice really ought to fail. Where is the heat coming from? It should have frozen solid long ago. Little worlds have a lot of surface compared to their volume, so whatever warmth they start with radiates away fast, and they end up cold all the way through. Enceladus is being kneaded. It does not orbit Saturn on a neat circle. There is another moon further out called Dione, and Enceladus goes round Saturn exactly twice in the time Dione takes to go round once. That 2-for-1 rhythm means the pair line up in the same places over and over, and every time they do, Dione gives Enceladus the same small gravitational tug in the same direction. Repeat that for long enough and the tugs add up. They pull the orbit out of a circle and into an ellipse. An elliptical orbit means the moon is sometimes closer to Saturn and sometimes further away, and Saturn's gravity is not gentle. So the whole moon gets stretched and released once every 33 hours. Bend a paperclip back and forth and the metal gets warm in your fingers. That is this, at the scale of a world. That flexing is what keeps the water liquid. Not sunlight, which is 90 times weaker out there than it is here, and not leftover heat from formation, which ran out long ago. Just a neighboring moon, pulling on the same schedule for a very long time. Which means the ocean is not a happy accident that happened once. It is being actively maintained by the arrangement of the Saturn system itself. And then there is the silica, which is the material that sand and glass are made from. And Cassini found it in Saturn's E-ring, as grains so small. You need an instrument to know they are there. Those particular grains are difficult to manufacture because you need liquid water in direct contact with rock, and you need that contact to be hot, above roughly 90 degrees. A frozen moon in the outer solar system is not supposed to have 90 degrees anywhere. The one place we know of where hot water meets rock and produces exactly this is the deep ocean floor here on Earth, at hydrothermal vents. Those vents are among the leading candidates for where life on this planet began, because they provide heat and chemistry and shelter without a single photon of sunlight. NASA is careful with how they put this, and so will I be. The silica points towards hydrothermal vents beneath the ice of Enceladus, and pointing towards is not the same as proving. But add the whole thing up, and what Cassini tasted was water from a global ocean, in contact with warm rock, carrying carbon chemistry 20 times more concentrated than the predictions. NASA's own summary of what that amounts to is exact, and it stops short in a way that is worth noticing, because they say Enceladus has most of the chemical ingredients needed for life. Most, not all. That word is doing enormous work, and anyone who quietly drops it on the way to a headline is selling you something. Cassini flew past Enceladus for the last time in October 2015. Having been at Saturn for 11 years on a mission that was designed to last 4, by then it was running low on the one thing that could never be resupplied. Every turn it made, every course correction, every time it pointed an instrument at something, it spent propellant. When that ran out, the spacecraft would not stop moving. It would simply stop being steerable, which in a system full of moons is a different and worse problem. An uncontrolled spacecraft loose in the Saturn system ends up somewhere eventually. And the overwhelmingly likely answer is nowhere at all, drifting for millions of years and hitting nothing. But the answer that cannot be ruled out is a moon. That is the whole problem. Cassini launched from Earth in 1997, and however carefully a spacecraft is cleaned before launch, nobody can honestly promise it carries nothing. And the moon it might one day hit is the one with the ocean underneath it. So on the 15th of September 2017, while there was still fuel in the tanks, and while they still had full control of it, they turned Cassini towards Saturn and flew it into the planet. It kept sending data the entire way down until the atmosphere tore it apart. NASA gives two reasons for that decision, and they belong together. The propellant was nearly gone, and the moons had to be left pristine for whoever comes next. In particular, in their words, the ice-covered, ocean-bearing moon, Enceladus. Think about what that decision actually was, because it is one of the strangest things our species has ever deliberately chosen to do. We sent a machine more than 1 billion kilometers, and it found an ocean nobody knew was there. It flew through the spray coming off that ocean and told us the water was salty and warm and full of the chemistry living things are made from. And then, precisely because it had told us that, we flew it into a planet and destroyed it. The discovery was the reason it had to go. There is nothing at Saturn now, and there has been nothing since that afternoon in 2017. So everything we know about that ocean comes from a machine that no longer exists, and from data that stopped arriving 9 years ago. There is one more thing worth sitting with. Every number in this film came out of an instrument reading in flight, on a mission that was never designed to find an ocean, at a moon nobody had planned to study properly. The magnetometer that started it was there to map a magnetic field. The discovery was a side effect of paying attention to something that did not fit. The jets are still going. They were going before Herschel ever looked. They were going while Voyager sailed past, and they were going the entire time nobody was watching. Somewhere under that ice, there is a dark, salty, warm ocean that has been there long enough to matter, full of the chemistry that living things are built from. And in the whole history of our species, we have tasted it exactly once. Next time, Europa, because Enceladus is not the only ocean out there, and the other one holds more water than every sea on Earth put together. This has been Cosmian.